A Remarkable Escape from Death by S.C. Turnbo. Just over the line in Taney County, Missouri, on the north side of the White River, is a rough gulch-like hollow which mouths into the river at the upper end of the Panther Bottom. This gulch is known as Cedar Hollow. Up this gulch, near 1/2 mile above the mouth, is a cliff rock which runs along each side of the hollow. Now, on the east side, it is 85 feet from the beginning to where the water pours down, and on the west side, it's 48 feet from where the water pours over to a gap in the cliff, where the cliff sinks into the bluff. Now, just on the west side, where the water in the bed of the hollow pours down, is a cave or basin in the rock wall that is 17 feet high and 9 feet deep. Below this, along the bed of the branch and on each side of it, is very rough with large rocks lying close together. The cliff where it crossed the channel of this hollow makes a sharp curve. At this place, a bloody scene occurred during the Civil War. 3 men, Bill Riddle, Ben Williams, and Anderson Moore, had camped a few nights in the basin of the cliff where we just mentioned, and reconnoitering, a party of 3 who happened to pass one afternoon near this locality discovered the smoke from a fire which the men had built under the shelving rock. This was on the 31st of January, 1865. Now, the air was calm, and the column of smoke had ascended high above the cliff. The parties who made the discovery lost no time in reporting it to a company of mounted Federal soldiers, who on the following morning at sunrise surrounded the hiding place of the 3 men and opened fire on them. The poor fellows were taken on surprise and were almost defenseless, but having one old muzzle-loading rifle with them. While the bullets fell in the shower around the startled men, they offered to surrender, but the attacking party refused to show them mercy, and they started running the gauntlet and fled down the rough gulch. Williams only got a few yards from the shelter when he was shot dead. Some 50 feet from where the Williams fell on the west side of the bed of the hollow is the middle of the steep point of land or ridge-like formation. It's on this spot Mr. Riddle received a severe wound in the fleshy part of the leg between the knee and the ankle, which knocked him down. Now, 45 feet from here is a little rough gulch that empties into the main hollow 150 feet below, where the water pours off the cliff. After the man had fell, he managed to crawl and roll into a little gulch. By this time, he was able to rise to his feet again, and amid the shower of bullets, he ran down the gulch some 60 feet into the main hollow, where he received a bad wound in the hand. He now ran down the hollow, where he passed in a few feet of 2 guards that had been posted there to prevent the men from escaping that direction. One was standing on each side of the bed of the branch, and he ran between them, and they shot at him and missed the mark. The wounded and bleeding man ran on down the hollow a short distance below the 2 vignettes, where he received a 3rd wound, but it failed to bring him down. Onward he rushed a few yards further, and then leaving the rough hollow, he ran up the hill on the east side and finally made his escape. Mr. Moore escaped without being hit and ran along on the side of the hill on the west side of the hollow to the mouth and concealed himself further under the drift. The attacking party, who said it is numbered of 20 men, did not pursue Riddle, and assembled together on the side of the hill the west of the cliff and rode down to the point of the bluff, where they dismounted and led their horses down the steep hillside and across the mouth of Cedar Hollow and down through Panther Bottom. As the soldiers were passing the mouth of the hollow, they passed in a few yards of the driftwood in which Moore was hid. Now let us return to Bill Riddle, who is fleeing for his life. The morning was cold and crisp, with wind blowing, and the wounded man's blood was slowly ebbing away. The excitement from the attack, exhaustion from running, and the suffering from the wounds and the loss of blood made him weak and cold, and he felt as though he would stagger and fall as he ran over the ridge just east of the hollow and down the hill into Pine Hollow. Going down this hollow, a quarter of a mile, he stopped to rest under a ledge of a rock, but thinking the enemy might pursue him, he left his rock shelter and fled onward and made his way to Big Creek and sought refuge under a ledge rock in the face of the bluff just below Daniel Quick Ford, where he laid behind big icicles, weak and shivering and cold. Late in the afternoon he saw the same company of men pass up the creek. Now, soon after dark, the wounded man left his icy bed and groped his way over the rough hills and across the rugged hollows to where he lived on the Allen Lucas place at the mouth of Little Buck Creek. As the man was crossing Cedar Hollow, below the cliff where they had been attacked, he saw a light where the dead body of Williams lay and heard the voices which proved to be the grief-stricken mother, Mrs. Mary Anderson, wife of John Anderson, and the other women, preparing to take the remains of her beloved child to the ridge just west of the Robert Casebolt residence on Big Creek, to bury them in a grave that had been dug to receive the remains of Mr. Casebolt, who was killed on Buffalo. But it was found that the body of Mr. Casebolt could not be brought back home, and he was buried where he was slain, and Mr. Williams' body was buried in the grave that was dug for the reception of the dead body of Mr. Casebolt. Mrs. Anderson was formerly a widow woman, and Mr. Anderson had married her near Fort Smith, Arkansas. On the following morning, Mr. Riddle mounted a horse that had got away from the enemy in the excitement of the attack, and which was found by some of Riddle's friends in the Buck Bottom just above the mouth of Big Buck Creek, and he rode him to the Matt Hovelenpile farm, where he made the horse swim the river with him at the mouth of Big Beech Hollow, and made his way to his friends in Locust Hollow, who took charge of him. The wounded and suffering man was bad chilled with cold, and when he arrived there his wet and bloody clothes were so bad frozen on him that they had to be cut off of him before they could put dry ones on him. Just as soon as his friends could move him, they had taken him into the forest of pine trees near where Dodge City now stands, and where they built a shelter and kept him there until he recovered from his wounds. Oh, those terrible, gloomy days, how dark and bloody they were!